I have a next series here, right after we did the trying to figure out readiness, particularly in the gen population. But we're going to run a series of some questions that relate to Elite Performer Program. I'm sure at some point we will put this back out in another launch, maybe even soon at the end of the month. We'll see. But these are questions from somebody who's trying to run the program, and I think given the scope of these questions, it's relating to a lot of the questions on aerobic type training, long, slow duration, with all this stuff that seems to be a little bit polarizing. I don't find it polarizing at all. I think there's probably something being missed with the different terminologies that different people are using, and actually everybody agrees that certain things are very, very important to be doing. I could be wrong about that everybody agrees. I don't think I'm wrong what I'm going to tell you. So the question, the first one was, what is the healthy heart? And trying to create some lines from interpretations from the things that I'd be saying is that whatever I am describing in the eccentric heart value, that is where the healthy heart exists. And I think that is correct. So I want to show you why that is. So we're going to look at this side here will represent the eccentric heart. So we're just going to divide this into different quadrants, and the left ventricle is really what we talk about, eccentric and concentric heart. That is the adaptation that we are looking to elicit from the left ventricle. Without a doubt, all of the ventricles are always important. That being said, the left ventricle is probably the one that will have the best link to understanding why do we care about this stuff in the first place. We'll create the same thing over here, and this side will represent the concentric heart. Now, here's why the eccentric heart adaptations, and the one that has that is going to be the one that's healthier. So let's say you go through the different protocols. A lot of the ones that are being eschewed, if you will, meaning people don't like them or they think that no one should need to do them. Well, I don't know that everybody needs to do them. If they already have the adaptation, it's going to drive more efficiency elsewhere. So we're looking at relatively low heart rates. And the reason we want low heart rate is so that there is enough time to fill this left ventricle with as much blood as possible. So if you're actually doing this for a fairly long period of time, I'm not talking about a walk, which has high value for NEAT, non-exercise thermogenesis, okay? But if we are above the intensity of walking, maybe it's 120, maybe it's 130, maybe it's as high as 150, and you can maintain that relatively lowish heart rate for a very long period of time, the body needs blood to the periphery to continue normal function. So what is the adaptation? The adaptation is that the heart will change to allow more blood into the left ventricle. More blood into the left ventricle, the more blood that gets out for any given systole, any given sinus rhythm, any given punch from the heart, whether the punch is very hard or the punch is light. We're talking about light right now because it has to be light. And if we keep the heart rate low, then there's enough time for this to fill maximally. If this fills maximally, this is what's going to happen. This myocardium of the left ventricle, I'll use a different color here, is going to be maybe not larger at rest, but it's going to be springier. And what will happen as more blood is able to get into the left ventricle, it will become this, which is very, very valuable because once this is springy and remains springy, then for any given heart rate, you will be able to fill with more blood because this becomes like a trampoline. So if you put something really, really heavy on a trampoline, it will then expand and then be able to shoot out. So I've described this at some point, it's almost like a plyometric for the heart. Of course, the stretch shortening cycle isn't necessarily the key factor here. The key factor is keeping the heart rate low enough so that you can fill up a lot of load, or whatever the measure of fluid in that of the blood that then forces this muscle to then eccentrically contract. That's why we call it eccentric heart adaptations. And the protocols that primarily improve this particular quality have other names, and none of them are wrong. As most people know, I get really, really frustrated sometimes when people make words up and change names for no reason. I think if we understand what the protocol is doing, then that's a very good way to name something. If you like to call it something else, where the heart rate stays relatively low, the same things are happening. What I'm suggesting is that there's many different protocols that can touch eccentric heart adaptations as well as primarily focus on them. But that's what makes this a healthier heart, because then at any given moment it's easier to keep the heart rate low. When you can punch out more blood for any given beat of the heart, then all of a sudden you don't have to work as hard. And that's really the link into the performance piece. Now, here's what happens with the concentric heart, which is really quite the opposite. If you only have concentric heart adaptations and your training is only very, very intense, and you didn't show up to the dance with even moderate levels. I don't know what moderate levels actually mean, but my point is, as long as you have this, I think you have good value being here. But if you have none of it, what will happen is because the effort is, the heart rate is very, very high, the effort is to punch, and then this is what happens. The left ventricle actually becomes smaller because of the hypertrophy inside the heart. So then I'm going to redraw where the left ventricle was along the line there. So the total volume from the outer edge of the myocardium to whatever the inside edges are, that didn't change. But you built muscle consistent with what it was doing, which was pushing out. Over here, the hypertrophy was consistent with expansion and eccentric contraction. So now the degree of fluid as per the blood is much less than what we would get over here. And that's very, very important, because now less blood is getting punched for any one heart rate. This is why aerobic training and below threshold training, of which there are many, many different protocols. Most people that say, well, you don't need to do any aerobic, you don't need to do any, they are doing it, they just don't call it aerobic, because quite frankly, for a lot of people, 145, 150, 160, it's challenging for people. So maybe it's challenging to them because it's less aerobic because they're not in good shape. But ultimately, there is a point where you're going to use the maximum amount of oxygen before you change into other energy systems. Those other energy systems are going to have a very, very high heart rate, and then if this is only what you do, now you have a problem, because now the heart rate continues to go faster because you can't get enough blood. Your only other option is to increase heart rate, to increase total stroke volume. It can't happen. Stroke volume can't change anymore when this adaptation has taken place. It can also be genetic, which we know, but that's why that type of adaptation is a little bit scary, particularly when you're going to work with individuals that need to live at those high heart rates to be successful at their sport. But unfortunately, you can also develop that concentric based hypertrophy, which is on the inside of the left ventricle's myocardium. So that's the difference as to why the eccentric heart, the adaptations of an eccentric heart is better than the adaptations of a concentric heart for the purpose of health. For the purpose of performance, we got to live somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit towards one direction if we are looking to improve performance. It's not an option to suggest that a marathoner is going to have the same type of heart in terms of left ventricle's adaptations as a shot putter, a power lifter, or even a sprinter. So there must be some acknowledgement, and the third tenet of those macro qualities that we talk about in T=R Elite Performer Program is a sport or activity specific heart, to suggest that everybody needs the same, particularly when we're looking at elite performance. No, not okay. If someone, a developing young athlete, undertrained individual, no problem. Everybody can do very, very similar things and build all the bases of all the macro and micro qualities, because everybody will get better. But when you're at the very, very top, anything that doesn't make you better makes you worse. So I think that's important. Last thing to consider in terms of health, we do need to dose eccentric heart, just not so much that it creates I'm sorry, I think I said eccentric. We do need to dose concentric heart, not to the point that we get the adaptation, but so that you introduce it, so you have some awareness of what it feels like, and so this heart becomes accustomed and conditioned to sometimes being there, because if you do have to be at those significantly high heart rates, you will be at less risk to develop changes electrically through the heart that you've never seen before. So without high levels of eccentric heart awareness, meaning you had a chance to be there, you got your chance to experience this, then unfortunately, if it's new, an event or complete loss of performance, you'll gas out immediately, quickly, if you have no reference point, even if it's just an awareness of what those levels of lactate feels like. So it's not to be ignored. But if the question is very simple, which one, eccentric or concentric, is closer related to a healthy heart, the answer is here, because now you'll get more blood with any one hit. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'm sure that leprechaun up in that tree has a really good eccentric heart.